Welcome, bienvenue tout le monde à notre première conférence, the Worldwide Freedom Initiative. Today is the 4th of July and it's an important day for all of us. C'est un jour très important pour les Américains. C'est le jour de l'indépendance. Ça fait 247 ans qu'on a eu notre liberté. La liberté, ça se gagne, ça se travaille, ça se maintient. Et c'est pourquoi on est là aujourd'hui. Avant de commencer notre événement, bien entendu, en tant que bon Américain et bon Français, on va écouter notre chère violoniste, Madame Furman, qui va faire l'hymne national. Je vous remercie de vous mettre debout, s'il vous plaît, pour l'hymne national. Merci. Bravo. Merci beaucoup, Madame Furman, c'est très très beau. Welcome again, welcome. Messieurs, Mesdames, chers élus, chers dignitaires, députés, ministres, ambassadeurs, merci à vous tous. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed representatives, members of Parliament, ambassadors, ministers, and dignitaries from across the world. Gabon, Ivory Coast, Togo, watching us across from Hong Kong, Morocco, Israel, Japan, South Korea, UK, USA, and a number of other countries. Today, nous avons l'honneur d'inaugurer le lancement de Worldwide Freedom Initiative. C'est quelle cette initiative, c'est quoi et comment? Cette initiative, c'est d'établir des valeurs, de réunir les gens de toutes sortes, de tous les pays du monde, que ce soit l'Afrique, l'Asie, l'Europe et les États-Unis, autour des valeurs communes, des principes qui sont chers à nous tous. Il s'agit de notre histoire, de notre propre religion, quelle que soit la religion, que ce soit des musulmanes, que ce soit des chrétiens, que ce soit des juifs, que ce soit aussi les traditions de toutes sortes, de tous les pays, que ce soit aussi au niveau de l'art, la culture. Tous ces aspects-là sont très importants et partagés et on doit les renforcer. Et c'est pourquoi aujourd'hui, on a nos spécificités et c'est ça ce qu'on doit protéger. Non seulement au niveau culturel, c'est aussi au niveau économique. Chaque pays a ses besoins. C'est une forme de patriotisme économique que nous luttons pour Il ne faut pas que ça disparaisse dans la masse mondiale. Chacun doit se renforcer. Et nous allons travailler, nous allons faire des efforts pour réunir tous ces leaders de droite, du centre-droite, des différents pays pour notre événement en novembre. Et c'est pour cela qu'on est là aujourd'hui, pour inaugurer aussi cet événement, mais aussi pour fêter le 4 juillet des États-Unis. Aujourd'hui, je souhaite parler surtout d'un sujet très important que vous avez eu l'occasion d'entendre beaucoup parler, c'est le wokisme. Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est le wokisme? We have to talk about wokism today. We're going to, about the challenges that are facing wokism and how we perceive it. Wokism has a phenomenon that has been existing for a number of years, and today we'll have our guests talking about it we have our guest from Africa, Mr. Mike Joktan, who is a bishop, a Protestant bishop, and presidential candidate to Gabon. We have also our wonderful Congressman Mike Johnson that will appear very soon. Also, he'll be also giving us our view on wokeism in the United States and the importance to fight against wokeism in the world and the importance of having our conference. Afterwards, we'll have Mr. Abramovich, who is one of the leaders of the main associations in France fighting against anti-Semitism and negationism here in France, and how he feels that wokeism is also a vector of anti-Semitism, and he'll discuss that with us today. At the same time, we have our wonderful guest is Mr. Jeremy Stubb, who is the president of the British Conservatives for the UK here in France, as well as the directeur adjoint of the publication of Causeur magazine. And so, alors, nous avons un des invités encore, notre cher évêque et notre cher candidat à la présidentielle, M. Joktan. On a Abramovich aussi de notre association, c'est le Bureau national de vigilance contre l'antisémitisme, et aussi Jeremy Stubbs, qui est le président des conservateurs britanniques en France et rédacteur adjoint de magazine Causeur. Alors, on va revenir aujourd'hui à des questions qui peut-être sont pas faciles à comprendre. Qu'est-ce que c'est le wokisme? Si on le conçoit bien, there's 3 facets of wokism. Il y en a 3. Il y a un côté culturel, there's a cultural side, idéologique, c'est la même chose, and a psychological side. So there's 3. Cultural first, because it's rooted in old Judeo-Christian resentment, which reactivates without them realizing it in those who fall for this radical contemporary iconoclasm. Culturel, parce que ça trouve son terreau dans le vieux ressentiment et la vieille mauvaise conscience judéo-chrétienne qui réactive sans qu'ils s'en rendent compte chez eux, qui tombent dans cette iconoclastie contemporaine radicale. Another factor, the other kind, ideological, because there are individuals who erect this iconoclasm into a system for their lust of power, acting indiscriminately against all legacies. Idéologique, car il s'est trouvé des individus pour ériger cette iconoclastie en système, asseoir pour leur désir de pouvoir en les jetant sans distinction contre tous les héritages. Et dernièrement, psychologique. Why is it also psychological? Because they embrace it and are for the most part unhappy people. I really believe the ones that support wokeism, who find a place in this new world that they haven't found in traditional structures of our society, which are in crisis now. Psychologique enfin, parce que ceux qui reconnaissent sont bien souvent des malheureux, qui trouvent une place qu'ils n'ont pas trouvée dans les formes traditionnelles en crise de nos sociétés. Quelles sont les réponses? What are the solutions for this triple-faceted challenge? Quelles sont les réponses pour ces défis, ces triples défis? Il faut d'abord, une réaffirmation de notre tradition. Le savoir éveille à une contemplation rationnelle de l'histoire. Le wokisme en excite des interprétations à charge simplistes. Pareil à l'alphabet Pyranum qui est peint Hugo dans son poème « À qui la faute ?» Croyant venger les victimes de l'histoire de leur ancien oppresseur, le wokisme rend pertinente en Occident, les tristes proverbes africains, c'est pourquoi aussi un clin d'œil à notre ami, un veillard qui meurt, c'est une bibliothèque qui brûle. Again, the first part, we need to reaffirm to fight against wokeism is tradition. The knowledge awakens the mind of rational contemplation of history. Wokeism stirs up simplistic, accusatory interpretations of history, believing it is destroying evil by erasing its trace. Wokeism ignores George Santayana's warning, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Making relevant in the West is the sad African proverb, when an old man dies, a library burns. We must then reconcile our youth with this world, as it should be, as is according to the ideals of our principles and the principle of reality. In this age of unprecedented opportunity, optimism, the hallmark of both enlightenment and the American dream, is the way forward, not archaic resentment. Again, on doit faire face, et la question c'est la réconciliation de la jeunesse avec le monde tel qu'il devrait être, et tel selon laquelle les idéaux de nos principes et les principes de réalité. Les woke s'imaginent que c'est l'ignominie de passer d'un acharnement l'autre qui les honorera. Nous le répondrons à notre époque d'opportunités sans précédent. L'optimisme marqueur des Lumières et du rêve américain s'impose, et non l'archaïque en cure. Après, on doit aussi terminer de reconfirmer les valeurs de tolérance, de respect qui bafouent le woke dans le même temps. We must also reaffirm the values of tolerance and respect that the woke flouts and flaunts at once. Wokeism is fragile, but we can fight it. Again, the three solutions is to adapt to the particularities of each country as we know them. We must adapt. On doit adapter les solutions spécifiquement par rapport à chaque pays. C'est pourquoi on est là. On est là pour partager. D'abord, décerner, identifier, partager, et ensuite aborder les problèmes proprement à son propre histoire, que ce soit l'histoire de la France avec ses colonialismes, que ce soit l'histoire des États-Unis avec l'esclavage, et les histoires du pays en Afrique qui ont eu les ravages des époques de l'Europe et d'Amérique qui se sont mêlés dans leur histoire et doivent faire face à leur propre histoire entre eux. C'est ceux-là à laquelle on doit faire face. Mais c'est pas que ça. Il faut savoir que wokism s'est largement constitué parmi et diffusé depuis les campus universités de gauche après mai 68. The wokeism was largely formed among and spread left-wing university campuses in the United States after May 1968. Why May 1968? Because they inspired the so-called thinkers of liberation. And some authors call it the ruse de l'histoire. Il y a des gens qui pensent que les penseurs des années 70 sont des libérateurs, mais encore, il y en a certains qui les disent que c'est un ruse de l'histoire. I'm repeating myself, so I will move on then to the so-called thinkers who were affiliated with structuralism, the opaque intellectual movement according to which man is devoid of essence, is the only crossroads of ideas that flow around him, none of which holds value than any other. There is the source of the worst postmodernism and relativism, a school for despair, and some misguided minds have turned into a political project aimed towards the subversion of civilization. Nombre de soi-disant penseurs étaient affiliés au structuralisme, un mouvement intellectuel opaque selon lequel l'homme dépourvu d'essence ne serait qu'un carrefour des idées qui fussent autour de lui, dont aucune n'aurait plus de valeur que une autre. Là est la source du pire du postmodernisme et du pire du relativisme. De cette école du désespoir dont certains esprits mal tenants ont fait un projet politique de subversion de la civilisation. Encore, I would like to say that those who faced with the advance of wokeism are now understandably tempted by anti-Americanism, C'est ça aussi le grand problème aujourd'hui. On est face à cette situation qui est venant des États-Unis et beaucoup d'étrangers pensent que c'est les pires des mécanismes et le wokisme est l'Amérique. Mais ce n'est pas l'Amérique. Et c'est le parti républicain qu'on représente ici en France est contre ces mouvements. Et vous devez savoir qu'on très haut, et je dis clairement pour le compte des Français, tous les gens qui nous écoutent, qu'on est contre ce mouvement et on doit savoir qu'on a une histoire à partager avec vous pour cette lutte qui est une lutte qui va prendre des années et une lutte qui va durer longtemps. Vous devez savoir qu'il y a de l'espoir et j'ai eu l'occasion avec des amis qui m'ont invité à le dire qu'on a une nouvelle histoire. La semaine dernière, les Américains ont mis fin à la discrimination positive en tant que politique générale des racismes au sein des facultés et universités aux États-Unis. Pourquoi c'est important? C'est très important parce que, je vous explique, tout le monde a soutenu la discrimination positive aux États-Unis. Moi, j'étais le premier dans les années 80, 80 et 2000. C'était une mesure exceptionnelle pour créer l'égalité. Mais il est devenu aujourd'hui, l'exception est devenue la règle. Et la règle ne peut pas être une discrimination sans condition. Il faut revenir au système des mérites. Et j'estime pour le respect mutuel, parce que la division entre les hommes en raison de leur race va susciter des nouvelles actes d'antisémitisme et des discriminations qu'on va trouver aux États-Unis à cause de cela. Ça ne va pas faire en sorte de réduire. Ne pensez pas que ça va faire disparaître ces fléaux. Ça va faire le contraire. Et ce qu'on entend, ce qu'on voit. Donc, par rapport à ça, j'aimerais vous dire juste une dernière chose sur la question qui est, on est face, j'ai décidé à la dernière minute de parler de ce qui se passe en France. I'd like to speak about one thing that's happening in France right now. Is you've seen various civil unrest going on, and I wanted to quote Plato, Platon, parce que il a dit quelque chose il y a 2000 ans qui est très pertinent, et je vais le citer. Lorsque les pères s'habituent à laisser faire les enfants, lorsque les fils ne tiennent plus compte de leurs paroles, lorsque les maîtres tremblent devant leurs élèves et préfèrent les flatter, lorsque finalement les jeunes méprisent les lois parce qu'ils ne reconnaissent plus au-dessus d'eux l'autorité de personne, alors c'est là, en toute jeunesse, en toute beauté, le début de la tyrannie. This is by 2,000 years ago. When fathers became accustomed to letting their children do as they please, when sons no longer heed their words, when teachers tremble before their pupils and prefer to flatter them, while, finally, when the young despise the laws because they no longer recognize above them the authority of anyone, then that, in all youth and beauty, is the beginning of tyranny. That, I will leave you with this note. And I will introduce our first speaker, which will be Mr. Mike Johnson, who serves as our congressman for the last 4 terms. We have the wonderful honor of having him online together here for us, the Congressional District of Louisiana. He serves as vice chairman of the House Republican Conference. He's a leader on the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. He is also the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, and is considered to be the intellectual arsenal of the conservatives in Congress. Mr. Johnson is a dedicated husband, father of 4. He's also a constitutional law attorney who's devoted his life and career to defending our fundamental freedoms, traditional values in courts, and in the court of public opinion. We'll be able to welcome Mr. Congressman Mike Johnson. Thank you very much.
Well, greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to participate in this celebration of our Independence Day. I am delighted to participate in Republicans Overseas and the Worldwide Freedom Initiative as the International Summit is launched and set for this November. What an important time for this. What a critical time. for all of these efforts and for the commitment that you all have to defend and preserve our fundamental freedoms and our essential cultural, historical, and religious heritage that all together really allows all people to be lifted up and allows the conditions for human flourishing. We all recognize that we are in unprecedented battles right now, not only for our constitutional rights, but for the very survival of Western civilization. There's no way to sugarcoat this. The challenges could not be any greater than they are, and the stakes, as we all know, could not be any higher. And the Congress, the members of the House Republican Conference, are fighting every day to push back against the radical left and its new invention, the woke agenda that has just taken hold. It aims to capture and tear down all of our institutions. And they've been pretty successful at that thus far. And they're aiming to dismantle the very foundations that made us the freest and most powerful and most successful nation in the history of the world. We all know how poisonous, how toxic this woke agenda is. It is terribly divisive. It is designed to separate and categorize people into categories of oppressors and the oppressed. It has infiltrated nearly every aspect of society, from our education system to now even the U.S. military, and it attacks truth in the name of inclusion. It's been a real poison in our society and in our culture. But I want to tell you and remind you all that there are some hopeful signs. We're optimists, by the way, as conservatives. We always are. We look towards the future with great anticipation, and we believe that our best days are still ahead of us. Just in the past week, the conservative U.S. Supreme Court has given us some more hopeful signs. They've issued a number of landmark decisions that will help us uphold religious freedom and the right of conscience, and even move beyond this insidious race-based criteria for college admissions, as well as Biden's unconstitutional student loan forgiveness wealth transfer scheme. These are just a few of the key battles, and we all know that each of them must be won. But to win the overall war for the future of the West, it's going to take all of us working together, collaborating and sharing our experiences across borders and advancing our principles and our policies, not just on Capitol Hill, not just in boardrooms around the country and around the world, but also in media and other outlets in the international arena. None of us is in this alone, and we are either going to stand together now or risk losing it all. We're in what my friend Dr. Oz Guinness likes to refer to as a civilizational moment. He says in the history of all great nations, there comes a time where the foundations of that nation are being undermined, they're being challenged. And that society, that culture, that nation has to decide whether to restore and defend and preserve those foundations or replace them with something else. We're perilously close to that moment. Today we celebrate our 247th birthday as a nation. And you know, if you're in high school or college, if you're a young person, that sounds like a long time, but all of us know it really isn't. On the wide span of human history, 250 years, 2.5 centuries is almost nothing. And we're still an experiment in self-governance. We're still a great experience, an experiment in a constitutional republic. And the founders of this republic, this greatest nation that has ever been, knew that what they were doing was not necessarily guaranteed to last. And so they gave us their admonitions on how to preserve it, how to keep the republic. And that's what all of us are engaged in right now, with all hands on the plow, trying to defend and preserve what we have been given, this extraordinary blessing, this experiment in liberty. 247 years. You know, I speak often to young people, college groups and high school students, and I'm often begin these lectures, these presentations, and I ask them if they know why America really is unique and extraordinary amongst all others. And I get lots of empty looks on their faces. And oftentimes I'll have a whiteboard or a large chalkboard behind me, and I'll take a marker or a piece of chalk, and I'll go to that board and I'll say, I'm going to show you in just 5 words here what is unique and distinct and different specifically about your country and why it is the freest, most powerful, most successful in all of human history. And I go up to the board and I write in large letters at the top, G-O-D. Then I write, go about halfway down the board and I write king with a lowercase k. And at the bottom of the board, I write the people / the subjects. I draw arrows down from the king to to the people and subjects. And I step back from the board and I look up and point to it and I say, now students, what you're seeing here is a word picture, a graphic depiction of what is referred to as the philosophy of the divine right of kings. Is that most nations in history, the ones that you know and have studied, believed primarily in something like this, that there was a deity perhaps, but the boss is the earthly sovereign, the king. The king is the one that can tell the people what they can do for a living, what property they can hold, where they can live, sometimes who they can marry, how many children they can have. The king was the boss. What's unique and different about our country is that we did something radically different. G.K. Chesterton, the famous British philosopher, said one time, America is the only nation in the world that is founded upon a creed. And he said that creed is listed with theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. Our nation's birth certificate, we celebrate on July 4th. And what did it say? The founders got together and they looked at this design and they said, you know what? The earthly king is not our boss. Our rights don't derive from a king or a state. Our rights derive from, frankly, the King of Kings. We understand it's a self-evident truth. It's obvious to us that our rights come from God, our Creator, and not from another man here on this planet. And so what I tell the students is, we did something radically different. In the Declaration, Jefferson wrote those words that we all know by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So I take the eraser. I go back to the board for my illustration, and I erase the king. I erase the middleman and all the arrows that came from the king to the people. And I erase the word the subjects. And all that remains on the board is God, the Creator. And I draw all the arrows that go down now just to the people themselves. And I say, ha, this is us. This is what is different. This is what made us remarkable. We're the first nation in the history of the world to base ourselves upon this premise. We took the middleman out. We created this experiment in self-governance. As Lincoln articulated many decades later in the Gettysburg Address, that we're dedicated to this proposition, that we are one nation under God, and that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people should not perish from the earth. This is what made us extraordinary and distinct. But what I tell the kids and the college students as they're watching this and nodding their heads and understanding what made us different, as I said, well, the problem is now that idea, that philosophy, that foundational truth led us to become this great nation. And for a century and a half or more, that was the prevailing sentiment. But then something began to change. And what we tolerated in moderation, our children excuse in excess. And I say to the young people all the time, what's happened now, the reason that you are not feeling and probably will not be able to enjoy the same liberty, opportunity, and security as your parents and grandparents had, is because something else has now been erased from the board. And I take the eraser and I go back up to the whiteboard or the chalkboard and I erase the letters G-O-D and all the arrows that come down from God to the people. And now the only thing that remains on their board for illustration is the people themselves. I said, this, my friends, is what's happened over the last couple of generations, is we've erased our recognition, the founders' self-evident truth that they proclaimed, boldly proclaimed that our rights come from our Creator. Now we have a rising number of people who do not even recognize the existence of the Creator at all. And there are huge implications from that, I tell the students, because the founders understood and believed vigorously in individual rights. Why? Because they understood that men were made in God's image. All of us are made in God's image. And because of that, every single person has inestimable dignity and value. And your value is not related in any way, by the way, to the color of your skin or what zip code you live in or where you went to high school or what your talents are, tell the students. Your value is inherent because it is given to you by the one who made you. But if there is no God, and if we accept the premise of the left that there is no absolute truth either, then you have no intrinsic individual value. In fact, I go to the board and I circle the people, I say, you are just a social animal. And my friends, if you think that's a happy circumstance by which to organize your society and your government and your culture, you're quite wrong. Because this is the basis of Marxism, communism, socialism. The idea that you're just another social animal. And you know what happens to the social animals? They must be directed. They must be controlled. And they must surrender their freedom to the all-powerful state. That leads you right back into tyranny. And that, I tell the young people, is the peril of today. That we are facing that as a new reality. And that the foundations and the foundational truths are worthy of defense. And it falls to us to be the stewards of those great truths. I'm finishing my first book right now, and it's called The 7 Core Principles of American conservatism. It's birthed out of necessity because, as you and I recognize, there are a lot of people in our party and a lot of self-identified conservatives in the U.S. and around the world who are not quite able to give a good defense for that. They can't articulate what it means exactly to be a conservative anymore. And to me, I think it boils down to 7 core principles. It's individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. And under each of those are subcategories. For example, under human dignity is the belief in the sanctity of every human life. But those are the principles that animated our party and our countrymen, and at its essence, our founding fathers from the very beginning. They believed that a strong and prosperous America would be good not only for Americans, but for all people around the world. And certainly since World War II, that has been the case. We are the great superpower, the great world power. And just the perception of a strong America in so many places, at so many times, is what has kept terrorists and tyrants at bay. Right now, my friends, we all know that we are projecting weakness on the world stage, not strength. We are advancing policies and ideas from the left in this country and the Democrat Party in charge that are anathema to the founding principles of our country. All those core principles that I just articulated, they believe in the opposite of them. And they are trying to tear down and dismantle those foundations that made us the great nation that we are. Psalm 11:3 in Scripture asks, if the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? That is not a rhetorical question anymore. It's one that you and I have to answer. And I think we have to speak with clarity and conviction like never before. And we have to lock arms and we have to engage in this battle together. It's a fateful one. The fate of our nation, and thus really, in some sense, the entire globe, depends upon our success in this great endeavor. A strong and prosperous America. That's what we're fighting for. The preservation of our fundamental God-given liberties. That's what we're fighting for. And I applaud you all for being involved and taking the time to contribute to this great cause. We wish you all a happy and healthy 4th of July. We look forward to the big event in November, and we wish you peace and prosperity for our nation and for all of us in the days ahead. May God bless you. Thank you again for allowing me to participate, and I hope you all have a great time together.
Quel mot de sagesse. Voilà, je remercie notre cher congressman Mike Johnson pour son intervention.